Hey, brothers and sisters. So I wanted to talk about the rapture being imminent. I was listening to a sermon last night by Andy Woods, and the question was asked, does the rapture have to fall on a feast day? And he brought up two really good points that I think we all need to consider now that the feast days have passed. Now, he did mention, right off the bat, I will say this, he mentioned that the feast days are good to study, and that they're good for looking at how Jesus is represented in each one of them. But he noted that Christians in the church age are not to necessarily observe the feast days in a legalistic manner. And the rapture does not have to come on a feast day. Now, he gave two reasons for this. Number one is imminence, and number two is that it would be putting the church back into the dispensation of law, or the Mosaic law, in which these feast days in Leviticus were given. Now let's talk about imminence. I had often wondered that if we continue to nail down a feast day for when the rapture could potentially happen, could that also mean that we would have to wait a whole nother year for the next feast, fall feast, to be fulfilled in order for the rapture to happen? And I began to think and ponder about this, and it didn't sit right in my spirit. And that's exactly what Andy Wood says. It takes away the imminence. Jesus can come back anytime, and he comes back as a thief. So if we were to set a feast day, it would basically take away the imminence of the rapture. And then the second point he made was the fact that the feast days imposed on the church put us into a dispensation of time that we are not in. We are in the church age. We are in the age of grace. If you remember how the first spring feasts were perfectly fulfilled by Jesus, it opened up the opportunity for Israel to be offered the kingdom. But we know in the book of Acts that that kingdom was rejected by Israel. And so the mystery was that Christ would begin the church in the day of Pentecost. This was a mystery from the prophets in the Old Testament, and many of the prophecies in the Old Testament spoke about a time when the Messiah would come and set up the kingdom, but nobody knew about the age of grace, which is the church age. And so Jesus, for the past 2,000 years, has been working on account of Israel's rejection of the kingdom on the church. And it says when the fullness of the Gentiles comes in, God will pick up his program with Israel. And what do we see, brothers and sisters? We see the 7-year tribulation period being for Israel, Jacob's trouble. And this is meant to bring Israel on a national scale to repentance. We see in Zechariah chapter 12 that God comes back and a third of the Jewish population repents. A third of the Jews are protected in the rock of Petra in Jordan. And we see that all Israel will be saved according to Romans chapter 11, verse 26. So, Jesus will fulfill the fall feasts, but not in the rapture. He will fulfill them at the end of the 7-year tribulation, which is Jacob's trial, which is God's program for Israel, in the second coming, and he will again bring the millennial kingdom, that Israel rejected before the church age was started. And now we see Jew and Gentile, church age saints, Old Testament saints, and tribulation saints, all going into the 1,000-year millennial kingdom at the end of the 7-year tribulation, in which all fall feasts will be perfectly fulfilled. And the rapture is a mystery. It is imminent. It is a twinkling of an eye. It is a thief-like event that is supposed to be sudden. Remember, brothers and sisters, when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes upon them. So just a few thoughts regarding this. And again, nothing against the feast days. I got a lot out of Barry Aw's teaching and a lot of what was said. But we have to remember that the rapture is for the church. And now that we're in the church age, it is imminent. It does not have to happen on a specific day. God bless.